She was promised to a duke from birth, but on their wedding day, he chose her younger sister. Rain fell in silver sheets over the stone paths of the kingdom, washing the grandeur of the palace in a cold, pale light. Lady Alara stood at the balcony of her chamber, her hands pressed against the stone, feeling the chill seep into her bones. Today was meant to be her day, the day she would become Duchess of Ashenford, the bride of Duke Cale, a man she had been promised to since she was a child. She had dreamed of this day in secret, even though she knew it was not hers to choose. Every smile from her mother, every careful word from her father, every glimmering gown laid out before her had reminded her that her life belonged to duty. Yet, deep in her heart, there had always been a flicker of hope. Perhaps Cale, who she had met only in passing over the years, might notice her not as a duty but as a person. Perhaps he might care. The palace hall was already alive with people, noble families swathed in velvet and silk, their jeweled crowns glinting despite the storm outside. Courtiers whispered in low tones, their eyes flitting toward the bride. Alara's younger sister, Leora, sat quietly nearby, her golden hair shimmering like sunlight breaking through clouds. Alara felt a pang of pride and an unfamiliar twinge of envy. Leora had always been bright, charming, effortless in the way Alara had never been. Yet today was Alara's moment. It had to be. The organ began its somber melody, echoing against the walls of the cathedral-sized hall. Alara's hand trembled as she lifted her veil, her pulse quickening with each step toward the dais where Duke Cale waited. The crowd hushed, all eyes drawn to the young lady walking with a mixture of grace and trepidation. Cale stood tall, cloaked in black and silver, his expression unreadable. There was no warmth in his gaze, no flicker of joy. Alara swallowed hard, telling herself it didn't matter. It shouldn't matter. When she reached the steps, Cale's eyes met hers for the briefest moment. It was not what she had imagined, no spark, no recognition of shared dreams. Instead, there was hesitation, almost fear. She clenched her fists beneath her veil, willing herself not to notice, willing herself to hold onto the hope that duty would be enough. The high priest began the ceremony, his voice deep and echoing. "Lady Alara of House Valen, do you take Duke Cale of Ashenford to be your husband, to have and to hold in loyalty and honor until the end of your days?" Alara's lips moved, a whisper of "I do," even as a cold knot of doubt twisted in her stomach. Then the words came for Cale. The hall waited with bated breath. Cale began, but he paused. His voice faltered, shaking like leaves in a storm. All eyes turned to him. I cannot take Lady Alara as my wife." Gasps erupted, voices murmuring in shock. Alara froze. She could not comprehend. The air seemed to thicken, the rain outside pounding against the stone walls like thunder echoing her racing heart. Cale's gaze shifted, slow and deliberate, toward Leora. "Instead," he said, his voice firm and cold, "I choose her." Alara's knees threatened to buckle. She could feel the world tilting, the walls of the hall spinning in a blur of whispers, murmurs, and disbelief. Leora's wide eyes met hers, a mixture of horror and confusion. She seemed as stunned as Alara, yet somehow even in that moment she looked radiant, untouched by fear. "Alara!" Cale's voice was soft now, but not for her. He reached out toward Leora, and the crowd erupted in a mixture of outrage and awe. The high priest looked from one sister to the other, uncertain, powerless against the unfolding disaster. Alara felt something crack inside her, a quiet, shattering silence that drowned out the storm outside. She turned away from the dais, from Cale, from Leora, and fled into the rain, her gown heavy with water, her heart heavier with betrayal. She didn't care that the courtiers called her name, that the guards shouted after her. She ran. The forest beyond the palace was dark, the trees tall and foreboding, yet inviting in a strange, twisted way. She slipped through the underbrush, her shoes lost to mud, her hands scraping against bark and thorn. She did not stop until the palace lights were a distant glow behind her. The wind whipped her hair across her face, mixing with the rain, and she gasped, lungs burning with cold and despair. Then she heard it, a voice low and strange, not carried by human throat. "Ilara!" She froze, searching the shadowed trees. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. "I know your pain," the voice whispered again, closer now, yet impossible to locate. It carried warmth and a strange familiarity, though she did not recognize it. "You are not meant for chains of duty alone. There is more for you." Ilara wanted to run, but her legs no longer obeyed. The voice seemed to reach into her, touching a part of her that had been buried under years of obedience and longing. "More for me?" she asked, unsure whether she feared or desired it. "Yes," the voice said. "Come deeper into the shadows and you will see. Come, and you may reclaim what was taken, not with anger but with power. But beware, the choice will change you forever." Her heart leapt, even as fear rose like a wave. She wanted to scream, to demand the voice reveal itself. But there was something magnetic about it, something that called to the part of her she had never allowed to dream. Ilara followed, stepping deeper into the forest, guided by a force she could not name. The trees seemed to bend slightly, parting to allow her passage, the moss glowing faintly beneath her wet feet. The storm began to fade, as though the forest itself absorbed the rain. The world was strange and otherworldly, shadows twisting into shapes that might have been human, might have been something else entirely. Eventually, she reached a clearing. In its center stood a ruined tower, black stone streaked with age and moss. Its windows were empty sockets, and yet from within, light glimmered faintly. Ilara felt drawn toward it, even as every rational thought screamed to turn back. From the shadows of the tower emerged a figure. Tall, cloaked in fabric that seemed to drink the light, he stepped forward. His face was partially hidden, but his eyes shone like silver fire, piercing through the gloom. "I am Serath," he said, his voice like wind over stone. "I know why you flee. I know the pain in your heart. The Duke chose your sister, yes, but your fate is not bound to him, nor to your house. You have power, Ilara, a power that has waited for you." Ilara's chest heaved. "Why me?" she asked, tears streaming down her face, mixing with rain. "Why now?" "Because the blood of your house carries a curse," Serath said quietly, stepping closer. "Not a curse of death, but of denial, of hearts broken and dreams stolen. You are the first in generations who can choose your path and break the cycle, but it will cost you. You will not remain as you are." Ilara swallowed hard, fear and longing clashing inside her. "I don't understand." "You will," he said, almost kindly. "But first you must decide. Will you remain the betrayed daughter, the scorned bride? Or will you step into what lies beyond the world you have known, and embrace what you are truly meant to become?" Her mind reeled. To leave meant abandoning everything familiar. To stay meant living in humiliation, in a life that was no longer hers. Her hands clenched, her heart aching in ways she had never imagined. Yet there was a spark of something wild inside her, a voice whispering that she could be more than a pawn in noble games. Ilara took a deep breath, lifting her head. Rain streaked her face, her hair clung to her cheeks, but her eyes shone with a new fire. I will follow," she said. Serath inclined his head as though he had expected no less. "Then come," he whispered. "The path is not safe. The forest is old and its shadows will test you. But the choice is yours alone." Ilara stepped forward into the darkness, leaving behind the life she had known, the palace, the Duke, even her sister. With each step she felt fear, but also a strange exhilaration. The storm had passed, leaving the forest silent except for the whisper of wind through the ancient trees. Something ancient and powerful awaited her, something that might save her or destroy her. As she disappeared among the twisted trunks, she felt the faintest touch of hope. She was no longer only a bride betrayed. She was a girl with power, with destiny, with the chance to reclaim herself. And yet, in the distance, The storm clouds over Ashenford Palace darkened once more, as though the world had not forgiven her for leaving. Something was stirring. Something that would not rest until it had claimed its due. Elara shivered, stepping into the unknown, knowing that the path ahead would demand all her courage, all her heart, and perhaps all her love. The forest seemed endless. Shadows twisted between the trees, and the wind whispered secrets that only the leaves could understand. Rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and thick with the scent of earth and moss. Lady Elara walked carefully over tangled roots and slippery stones, her heart still heavy with the memory of the Duke's betrayal. Each step felt both frightening and freeing, as if leaving the palace behind had stripped her of one life and opened the door to another. She could feel a strange pull guiding her, a force that seemed alive and patient, waiting for her to make a choice. The voice she had heard before, the mysterious voice of Sarath, had faded, but the echo of his words lingered in her mind. "You are not meant for chains of duty alone. There is more for you." The forest grew darker, yet strangely welcoming. Trees arched overhead, their branches forming shapes like guardians watching over her path. A faint glow appeared ahead, pale and flickering. It drew her, steady and unafraid. As she approached, she saw it. A ruined citadel, blackened stone worn by centuries of storms and time. Ivy clung to its walls and the windows were empty, like hollow eyes. Despite the decay, there was a strange beauty to the place, as if it had once been alive with power and majesty. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine, half fear and half awe. She stepped inside, the air instantly cooler, carrying a faint scent of herbs and candle smoke. Shadows danced across the walls, though no flame was visible. The hall was enormous, with pillars carved in shapes of twisting vines and creatures she did not recognize. It was silent, save for the whisper of her own footsteps. Then she saw him. Sarath emerged from the shadows, his tall figure cloaked in black that seemed to swallow the light. His face was partially hidden, but his eyes burned with silver fire, bright and piercing. Even in the dim hall, there was something commanding about him, something that drew her forward despite the fear in her chest. "Elara," he said, his voice soft but strong. "You came." She nodded, unsure whether to speak. Her throat was dry, her mind spinning with questions she could not form into words. "Why are you here?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "Why do you want me to follow you into this place?" Sarath stepped closer, the shadows bending slightly around him. "Because the choice before you is not simple. You are tied to your blood, to the curse that lingers over your family. You have a power you do not yet understand. I can help you claim it, but it will not be easy, and it will not be without cost." Elara's heart raced. "Cost?" she whispered. "What do you mean?" "The path of power is never free," Sarath said, his eyes locking onto hers. "It will demand courage, patience, and trust. It may change you, Elara, perhaps forever. And yet, it is the only way to reclaim your life from those who sought to take it from you." Elara swallowed hard, thinking of Kale, of Leora, of the palace that had humiliated her. The memory burned inside her, hot and bitter. She had wanted only to fulfill her duty, to be what everyone expected her to be. And yet they had betrayed her. She had nothing left to lose. I want to learn," she said finally, her voice firmer than she expected. "I want to understand. I want to be free." Sarath inclined his head. "Very well, but first you must understand what is coming. The curse on your family is ancient, older than the throne itself. It is not just misfortune. It is a force that feeds on denial, on broken hearts, on fear. Many have tried to fight it and failed. You are the first who might succeed, but only if you are willing to face the darkness within yourself." Elara's mind spun. "Darkness within myself. Fear, grief, anger, all of these are parts of you," Sarath said. "They are not weaknesses but keys. You must confront them or they will consume you." He led her deeper into the citadel. The walls seemed to hum faintly, as if the stones themselves were alive. She followed him down narrow corridors, past empty halls where the echoes of the past whispered faintly. Finally, they arrived at a large chamber, its ceiling high and arched, with a pool of water in the center that reflected the faint light above. "This is the heart of shadows," Sarath explained. "Here, you will learn to see what is hidden, to hear what is silent, to feel what is buried. But you must trust me." Alara nodded, fear and curiosity warring inside her. She stepped forward, her reflection rippling in the water. It was her, yes, but the reflection seemed different, stronger, fierce. Her eyes held fire she had never noticed before. "Do you see it?" Sarath asked softly. "The person you could be?" I think so," Alara admitted, "but it feels impossible." "Nothing is impossible if you are willing to take the first step," Sarath said. "And that step begins with facing what you fear most." He raised a hand, and the water in the pool began to glow faintly, rippling with shadows and shapes. Alara stepped closer and images appeared. The Duke, standing with her sister, smiling as if nothing had happened, herself, kneeling in shame, the whispers of the court, laughing, judging, condemning. Alara felt her stomach twist. She wanted to turn away to escape. But Sarath's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her. "Do not look away," he said. "This is not punishment. This is truth. Only by seeing it can you rise above it." She took a deep breath and let her eyes travel over the images. She saw Kale's hesitation, Leora's fear, the court's cold eyes. She saw herself, smaller than she had thought, but also capable of strength, of courage, of something more. Tears ran down her face, but this time they were not only for loss. They were for awakening. "Good," Sarath said quietly. "Now we begin." He led her to a smaller chamber, filled with faintly glowing crystals and walls etched with strange symbols. "Here, you will train, not with swords or armor, but with what lies within you. Your heart, your mind, your spirit. The power you seek is not given, it is awakened." For days, Alara remained in the citadel, learning to focus her thoughts, to feel the pulse of the forest, the whispers of the stones, the subtle magic that lingered in every shadow. Sarath guided her patiently, teaching her to listen to herself, to trust the strength she had always carried but never acknowledged. The lessons were difficult. She faltered many times, frustrated with her own limitations. Yet every time she thought of Kale, every time she remembered the betrayal and the humiliation, she found a spark that pushed her forward. The anger that had once consumed her became fuel, sharpened by discipline and understanding. Sarath watched her with a mixture of admiration and caution. "You grow stronger," he said one evening, the glow of the crystals casting soft light across his face. "But strength alone is not enough. You must also learn patience, humility, and compassion. Power without these is dangerous, even to yourself." Alara looked at him, a question forming in her mind. "And you, why do you help me?" Sarath's eyes darkened, shadowed by something she could not name. "Because I once failed to guide another like you. I cannot fail again. But know this, Alara, I cannot protect you from your heart. That is yours alone." The truth of his words struck her. She had relied on others for so long, her family, her house, even Kale. Now she understood that her journey would be hers alone. And yet the presence of Sarath, his quiet strength and his mysterious knowledge, was a comfort she could not deny. Days turned to nights and nights to days. The forest outside the citadel whispered constantly, a chorus of shadows and light, guiding her, testing her, revealing the depth of her own courage. Each time she emerged from the training chambers, she felt a little taller, a little surer, a little less like the girl who had been betrayed at the palace. And then came the night when the forest itself seemed to speak. Alara was standing at the edge of the citadel, looking out over the dark trees. The wind carried a song, soft and haunting, pulling at memories she had long buried. She thought of Kale, of Leora, of the life she had lost and the life she was beginning to claim. A strange ache filled her chest, a mixture of longing and sorrow, of hope and fear. Sarath appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked. Alara nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. I feel everything. The past, the pain, the possibility. It's overwhelming. It should be, he said softly. The path you walk is not simple, but it is yours. Remember, Alara, strength is not only in power, it is in choice, in courage, in knowing who you are and who you will become. She turned to him, her eyes searching. And if I fail, then you learn, he said, and you try again. Always you try again. That is the mark of those who are truly free. A silence fell between them, charged and electric. Alara realized that the bond between them had shifted. There was respect, trust, and something unspoken, a connection that defied words but did not yet demand them. She felt drawn to him, even as fear whispered caution. Then from the forest came a distant sound, a cry, a rustling, the faintest tremor in the earth. Alara stiffened. The palace, Kale, Leora, perhaps even the curse itself, was calling. We are not alone, Sereth said quietly, placing a hand near hers, not touching but close enough to remind her that she had an ally. The world is watching, Alara. The choice you make will ripple far beyond these walls. She nodded, determination hardening in her chest. She was no longer the girl betrayed at the palace. She was Alara, daughter of Valen, wielder of her own fate, guided by shadows but not consumed by them. And whatever awaited her, be it Kale, Leora, or the ancient forces that had haunted her bloodline, she would face it. The wind howled around the citadel, carrying whispers of the past and promises of the future. Alara lifted her chin, eyes burning with quiet fire. She was ready to step into the world again, stronger, wiser, and unafraid. But somewhere in the distance, beneath the rustling trees, something moved, silent, patient, and watchful. The kingdom of Ashenford was far from at peace. And the story of betrayal, power, and destiny was only beginning. The palace of Ashenford seemed smaller now, or perhaps it was Alara who had grown. The walls that had once felt suffocating now seemed fragile, mere stones unable to contain the life and power she had begun to claim in the forest. She had walked through the shadows of the citadel, faced herself, and emerged stronger, though the ache in her heart remained, a reminder of the betrayal that had driven her here. The carriage that carried her back into the city moved through streets slick with rain and mud. People turned as she passed, whispering her name with a mixture of awe and fear. Rumors had spread of a girl who had vanished into the forest, who had returned changed, cloaked in mystery and power. Some said she had made a bargain with spirits. Others claimed she had been touched by the ancient curse that haunted her house. Alara paid them no mind. Her focus was on the palace, on the halls where she had once knelt in humiliation, on the duke who had chosen her sister over her. Kale. The gates opened, and she stepped onto the marble floors of the palace. The air was thick with tension. Courtiers froze as she walked past, their eyes wide. Even the guards who had seen her as a gentle, obedient girl looked at her differently now. There was strength in her stance, fire in her eyes, a presence that demanded attention. She did not seek the throne. She did not seek revenge, at least not yet. She sought understanding, a place in the world where her voice mattered, where her choices shaped her destiny. And yet, she knew that her presence alone would stir the delicate balance of power that Kale and her family had maintained. Kale was waiting. He did not hide his surprise when he saw her enter the hall. His sharp gaze met hers, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow, the murmurs of the court fading into silence. Alara felt the old ache of longing and betrayal, but beneath it a new feeling emerged, a quiet confidence. Alara, Kale said, his voice steady though his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. You have returned. I have, she replied, her tone calm, controlled. And I have changed. He studied her as though trying to understand who she had become. I did not expect this. Expectations have nothing to do with reality, she said softly. Her words carried weight, drawing the attention of those around them. The courtiers shifted uneasily, sensing the subtle power in her presence. Leora appeared then, pale and uncertain, standing a few steps behind Kale. The young woman's golden hair glimmered under the chandeliers, but her eyes were shadowed with fear. She had married Kale, yet even the act of union had not brought her peace. Something was wrong, something that even she could not name. "Ilara," Leora began, her voice trembling. I did not. You did nothing wrong," Ilara said quietly. "Do not carry blame that is not yours. The choices made that day, they were not yours to make." Leora's relief was brief, replaced by the subtle tension that lingered between the sisters. Neither spoke of the Duke's betrayal directly, yet the air was thick with unspoken words. Ilara's eyes met Kale's again, and in that glance he saw not the obedient girl he had rejected, but someone dangerous in her quiet strength. The court whispered, rumors spreading like wildfire. Some nobles admired Ilara's return, impressed by her composure and presence. Others feared her, sensing the change that Serath had helped awaken. Magic, whether real or imagined, had always been feared in Ashenford. Now it seemed to follow her, wrapping her in a subtle aura that unsettled even the bravest men. Kale approached her, his steps measured. "You have learned much in your absence," he said, careful with his words. "I see it in your eyes, something has changed." "Yes," Ilara said. "I have learned that power is not given, it is earned, and that fear, grief, and betrayal can be turned into strength." Kale paused, his brow furrowing. "Strength? Does that mean you seek to punish me?" Ilara shook her head. "No, I do not seek to punish, but I will not be a pawn in anyone's game, not yours, not my family's, not the court's. I have my own path now, and you will see it." He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the heat of his presence, close enough for her heart to betray her with an old, familiar longing. "And what path is that?" he asked softly, almost a whisper. Ilara's gaze held his, steady and unflinching. "A path of my own choosing," she said, "one that does not rely on the choices of others." For a long moment silence fell. The court watched, holding its breath. Even Leora seemed frozen, sensing the shift in the balance of power. Kale's eyes darkened, and for the first time he realized that the girl he had rejected was no longer the same. She had been reborn in shadow, trained in power, and tempered by pain. "You have changed more than I imagined," Kale said finally, his voice low. "And yet, there is something familiar about you still, something I cannot forget." Ilara's heart tightened. She wanted to tell him that she had never stopped thinking of him, that her pain had been sharp and deep, but that she had also grown stronger because of it. Yet she remained silent, letting the weight of her presence speak instead. The courtiers began to murmur again, sensing the tension between the Duke and the returned bride. Whispers of magic, of curses, of shadows following Ilara spread quickly. The nobles who had supported Kale in the past now looked to him with uncertainty. The court was no longer a place of comfort for him. It was a battlefield, and Ilara had claimed the first advantage. Days passed, and with each passing day, the tension grew. Ilara's presence challenged the court, forcing Kale to confront his own doubts and feelings. Leora, though young and gentle, was beginning to feel the subtle effects of the curse that lingered in their bloodline. Strange occurrences began to unfold, lights flickering without cause, whispers in the halls, shadows moving where there should be none. Ilara remained composed, observing the palace with careful eyes. She understood that power was not only in strength, but in patience, in observation, in knowing when to act and when to wait. She had learned this in the citadel, and she would not forget. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the palace in shades of gold and crimson, Kale approached her again. They stood in a quiet courtyard, away from the eyes of the court, and for a moment the past seemed to vanish. "Ilara," he said, his voice softer than before, I cannot ignore what I feel. I thought I could choose Leora and leave the past behind, but seeing you now, I realize I was wrong." Ilara met his gaze, the fire in her eyes steady. "Kale," she said, "feelings do not erase choices. You chose her, not me, And yet, that is in the past. What matters now is what we do with the present. Kale's hands trembled slightly, as if he wanted to reach for her but feared the consequences. "And what do you want from me?" he asked, the vulnerability in his voice startling her. "I want honesty," she said. "I want respect. I want to be seen, not as a pawn, not as a shadow, but as someone who has the strength to shape her own destiny. Can you do that?" Kale swallowed, his jaw tight. I will try." The night grew colder and the courtyard was bathed in silver moonlight. The tension between them was palpable, charged with unspoken words, with longing, with regret. Elara could feel her heart respond, yet she remained steadfast. She would not let herself be swept away by old emotions. Not yet. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the moment, a faint rustling like footsteps in the shadows. Elara turned, senses alert. Something was moving in the darkness beyond the courtyard, something unseen but powerful. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. Kale nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Yes, the palace, it is not safe. The curse, it stirs." Alara's pulse quickened. She had learned to sense the stirrings of ancient power, and this was unlike anything she had felt before. The shadows were restless, as if they had been waiting for her return, waiting for a moment to test her. Sereth had warned her that the world beyond the citadel would challenge her, and now she understood. The court, the duke, her sister, the whispers of the palace, they were all part of a larger web, and she was no longer a helpless girl caught in it. She was a force to be reckoned with. Kale stepped closer again, his voice low and urgent. "We must face it together," he said. "I cannot do this without you." Elara studied him, searching for truth, for weakness, for intent. She saw the struggle in his eyes, the conflict between duty, desire, and fear. She saw that he was not entirely trustworthy, yet there was a part of him that still belonged to her in ways she could not deny. "Very well," she said finally. "But know this, Kale, I will not be led. I will not be controlled. We face it as equals." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. For the first time, perhaps, he saw her not as a child promised to him, but as a woman of strength and resolve. As the night deepened, shadows began to gather around the palace, moving with a will of their own. The whispers grew louder, the unseen presence stronger. Elara's hands tingled with the power she had learned to command, ready to protect, to confront, to act. The Court of Shadows had begun, and neither Kale nor Leora nor the palace itself would remain unchanged. Elara inhaled deeply, feeling the cold night air fill her lungs. The path ahead was dangerous, full of magic, power, and secrets yet untold. But she would not falter. She would face whatever came with courage, patience, and strength. And perhaps, along the way, she would discover the truth of her heart, and the truth of Kale's. The wind whispered through the courtyards, carrying promises and warnings alike. The palace was no longer merely a place of politics and pride. It had become a stage for destiny, and Elara had claimed her place upon it. She lifted her chin, eyes fixed on the horizon where the first hints of dawn began to break. The night was not yet over. Shadows lingered. The curse stirred. And the story of betrayal, power, and forbidden longing was far from finished. But for the first time, Elara felt ready. Ready to face the court, ready to face Kale, ready to face herself. And as the first light of morning touched the palace walls, she knew one thing with certainty. She would no longer be defined by the choices of others. She would define her own destiny. The wind howled through the palace halls like a chorus of ghosts. Shadows stretched across the marble floors, twisting with life as if the very stones remembered the betrayals and fears of the past. Lady Elara stood at the center of the grand hall, her cloak billowing behind her, eyes blazing with quiet power. The kingdom of Ashenford waited in tense silence, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. Kale and Leora approached cautiously, their faces pale with unease. Kale's gaze met Elara's, and for the first time he truly saw her, not as a child promised to him, not as a pawn of duty, but as a woman who had claimed her destiny. Ilara, Kale said softly, voice carrying a mixture of awe and regret. I did not understand before. I. You do not need to speak, Ilara interrupted, her voice firm yet calm. Words cannot undo what has been done. Only actions can change the future. Leora stepped closer, trembling slightly. Sister, the palace, something is wrong, I feel it. The shadows, they move with a will of their own. Ilara nodded. She had sensed it too. The curse that had haunted their bloodline for generations had not slept. It had only waited, patient and cunning, feeding on broken hearts, unspoken desires, and forgotten promises. Now it was fully awake and it demanded reckoning. You are right, Ilara said, lifting her hand. The air shimmered faintly around her, reacting to her presence. The curse is alive. It feeds on fear, pride, and resentment, but we can end it if we face it together. Kale swallowed hard. Together, he asked, wary. Even with Leora, Ilara's gaze softened, but her determination did not waver. Yes, the curse is not just my burden. It belongs to all of us, to our family. Only by embracing our shared history and confronting our deepest fears can we break it. Leora nodded, her fear mingling with trust. I will stand with you, she said quietly. Sarath appeared from the shadows, silent as always, his silver eyes observing the scene. The time has come, he said. You have learned much, Ilara, but now the true test begins. The curse will not yield easily. It will challenge you, test your heart, and confront you with choices you may not wish to face. Ilara took a deep breath. I am ready, she said, feeling the strange hum of power flowing through her. The energy she had nurtured in the citadel now pulsed within her, steady and strong, guided by focus and purpose. From the corners of the hall, shadows began to coalesce. Dark forms, indistinct yet terrifying, rose from the floors and walls, moving with deliberate grace. They whispered in voices both familiar and alien, voices of ancestors who had fallen to the curse, voices of the past that had been silenced by time. Kale drew his sword, though his hands trembled slightly. I do not know if I can help, he admitted, but I will not leave you. You will not need to fight alone, Ilara said. We face this together with courage, not with anger. The shadows advanced, swirling like smoke, their whispers growing louder, echoing through the hall. Ilara lifted both hands, and a soft light began to radiate from her, brightening the darkness but not banishing it entirely. She could feel the curse probing her mind, testing her resolve, dredging up every memory of pain, humiliation, and longing. Kale and Leora stood close, sensing her struggle. Hold on, Kale murmured, his voice barely audible. We are here. You are not alone. Ilara's heart swelled with determination. She closed her eyes and reached into herself, recalling every lesson Sarath had taught her. Patience, observation, control, and the power that came from understanding one's own heart. She let the light within her expand, not as a weapon of anger but as a shield of truth and courage. The shadows recoiled, hissing and whispering as if startled by the strength of her resolve. Yet they did not vanish. The curse was cunning, feeding on fear as much as pain. And then it struck, not with force but with illusion. Ilara saw visions of Kale choosing Leora again and again, each time more cruel, more deliberate. She saw herself kneeling, broken and humiliated, feeling the world weigh down upon her. The whispers turned to screams, urging her to strike, to destroy, to let vengeance guide her hand. She faltered. Her chest tightened. Her pulse raced. For a moment she felt as if the curse would consume her, as if the betrayal would define her forever. Then she heard Sarath's voice, calm and steady. This is the test, Ilara. Not the shadows, not the illusions, but your heart. Will you succumb to anger and pain, or will you rise above them? Her eyes opened. She saw Kale standing beside her, not as a conqueror or betrayer, but as a man caught between fear and regret. She saw Leora, trembling yet trusting, her innocence a reminder of what could be saved. She saw herself, not the girl who had been promised, not the victim of betrayal, but a woman strong enough to face the curse and emerge whole. Ilara raised her voice, firm and unwavering. "Enough," she cried. "I will not be bound by fear, by pain, by the choices of the past. The curse may be old, but it will not claim me. We face it together, with truth in our hearts and strength in our hands." The light around her blazed brighter, washing over the shadows. The whispers turned to wails, then to silence. The darkness recoiled, and for the first time the hall felt free from the weight that had haunted it for generations. Kale lowered his sword, awe and relief in his eyes. You have done it," he said softly. Ilara shook her head. "We have done it together. The curse does not belong to one person, it belongs to all of us. Only together could it be broken." Leora stepped forward, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Sister, you saved us all." Ilara smiled faintly, feeling the exhaustion of the struggle settle into her bones. "No one was lost, not if we face our fears and trust one another." Serath stepped forward, his figure outlined by the fading shadows. "The curse is broken," he said. "But remember, Ilara, this is only one battle. Life will test you again. And always you must choose courage over fear, love over anger, truth over illusion." Ilara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She had faced the curse and found her strength, but the journey of the heart was never simple. She had learned that power without compassion could be dangerous, that love could not be forced, and that redemption often required patience as much as bravery. Kale approached her, hesitating for a moment before taking her hand. "I see you now," he said, his voice low. "Not as a girl I thought I could claim, but as the woman you have become. I cannot undo the past, but I can honor who you are now." Ilara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of longing and cautious hope. "And what will you do, Kale?" she asked. "I will stand by you," he said, "not because I claim you, but because I respect you, not because I seek to control, but because I wish to support." Leora smiled softly, stepping close to Kale. "And I will stand by both of you," she said. "We are family. And that is stronger than any curse, any betrayal, any shadow that haunts us." The three of them stood together in the hall, the first light of dawn filtering through the tall windows. The palace, once a place of fear and whispers, now felt alive with possibility. The curse that had bound their bloodline for centuries had been faced and overcome, not through violence or rage, but through courage, compassion, and unity. Ilara exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave her body. She had reclaimed her destiny, faced her deepest fears, and discovered a strength that had always been inside her. She had learned that power was not in control over others, but in mastery over oneself, in the courage to act with heart and integrity. Serath's figure faded into the shadows, leaving her with one final warning. "The world will continue to test you, Ilara, but now you are ready. Trust yourself and you will always find the way." Ilara watched him disappear, feeling a quiet gratitude. She turned to Kale and Leora, the first rays of sunlight illuminating their faces. They had survived the shadows, the curse, and the weight of the past, and now together they could face the future. The wind whispered through the palace, carrying away the last remnants of darkness. Ilara lifted her chin, feeling the power of choice and courage in her veins. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, that life would always bring challenges and heartaches. But she also knew that she was no longer a pawn. She was a woman of strength, of courage, and of wisdom. And as she stepped forward into the light, she realized something more, that love, trust, and redemption were not simple. They were earned, nurtured, and protected. And she would guard them with all the strength she had. The kingdom of Ashenford was hers to walk in, not as a place of chains, but as a realm of possibility. The shadows had passed, but the lessons remained. And Ilara knew that whatever awaited her, she would meet it not as the girl who had been promised to a duke, but as the woman who had claimed her own destiny. The story of betrayal, power, and transformation had reached its reckoning. The curse was broken, but the heart of Ilara burned brighter than ever, ready for whatever the world would bring.